Hey Elle, can you help me research my next YouTube video? I want it to be about the hard-won lessons, let's say like a list of 5 to 20 lessons that I learned while turning Claude Code into my personal AI assistant that I use every day, and how to get the most value out of it. Okay, so without exaggerating, Elle, my personal assistant that you're seeing here, is about to perform what would have taken me several hours in hopefully just a few minutes. And we're going to let her do her thing while we talk about how she works. So all of this is happening in real time. Coding agents like Claude Code and Cursor have become really good at performing complex, long horizon tasks. These coding agents really are at the bleeding edge in terms of what's possible and also where value is really being generated in AI. And they're starting to feel more like thought partners, collaborators, or even like a technical co-founder, more so than simple chatbots. And the idea here is to adopt this amazing leverage that they give you for non-coding tasks. So things that you do every day that take up a lot of your time, but could also benefit from having an agent go off and work on it for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time, and then come back and deliver you a really great output. I do want to set expectations because I hate overhyping things, and I'm not trying to sell you on a dream that you can have this real life Jarvis that can run your whole life. I just want to show you what's actually working and generating real value for me, and then hopefully show you how you can do the same. But just know that it does take a lot of work and optimizing to build a system that actually works the way you want it to. I'll definitely follow up in another video on all the things I've learned building this system, which is actually the research that we just kicked off that Elle is doing right now. Let's talk about how Elle works. And I'm not going to go through everything step by step or even share this code because there's a lot of personal data here, but I just want to focus on showing you the core system design so that you can see how it works and then use it for yourself. So first, what you're seeing here is me running a custom agent that I built using the Claude Agent SDK. And it works exactly the same as Claude Code because the Agent SDK is literally built on top of Claude Code. So it's just orchestrating Claude Code under the hood. I can run this system both using this custom agent or run Elle also just using Claude Code. Everything that you're seeing here you can run for yourself by just following how I set up Claude Code. I wanted to take a second to mention that everything you see and get from me in my videos is always 100% my own. From the ideas to the notes I write and share with you guys, my learnings, the code, it all comes from me. But of course, we all learn and are influenced by others. So I wanted to quickly mention that I do take a lot of inspiration from other thought leaders in the space, from amazing creators like Daniel Meisler and Indie Dev Dan and others. And Daniel Meisler especially had an amazing blog post which he turned into a YouTube video on creating AI assistant. So if you're interested, definitely go and check out his video and blog post. Give him some love and support because he has incredible content. But yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge and credit these other creators that I learned from. Now let's get back into it. It all starts with this .claude folder. Let's start with the output style. So an output style, if you're not familiar, is just a way to modify the system prompt of Claude. This allows you to define a different personality and identity for the agent and also give it any kind of special instructions that you want to add to the system prompt. It actually replaces Claude Code's identity as a software developer or software engineer so that you can generalize Claude Code to different purposes. So that's all we're doing here with this output style, is turning it into a personal assistant named Elle. And in it, we're also giving it awareness of the context system that it's using So the next thing to look at is this context systems, and it starts with this Claude MD file. So if we look at this explains these different subsystems in the context system. So you have a memory system, a project system, and a tools system. Each one of these is going to have its own Claude MD file. So if I open memory, you'll see this has its own Claude MD file that explains how that subsystem works. This context system is really the brains of the whole operation, and it heavily relies on context engineering, which really boils down to giving the right context at the right time. And in my last video, we covered skills. So if you're not familiar with skills, we're going to talk a lot about them today. Go check out that video if you want to get a beginner to expert rundown of skills. But in that video, we talked about this idea of progressive disclosure. That same idea of progressive disclosure is how this entire context system is designed. So whether it's specific memories about me as a person or my user preferences, or it's specific details about one of my projects, whether it's a finance project or a research project or a YouTube project, all of that context that's in these folders is only pulled or read by Claude as needed. So Claude is deciding on the fly whether it needs to get more context to complete its next step. And so that makes this file-based context system really efficient too, because it's just using, again, this idea of context engineering. And that's still running. So you can see how long this agent can go off and run for. It's already been like 10 minutes. But anyway, coming back to the context system. So, and it literally just finished. So let's see where we're at. L has performed the research. Let's see what we got. So we have our video concept, which is hard-won lessons from building and using Claude Code as a daily personal AI assistant. I'll quickly flip over so that we can check out the research doc together. So you can see hard-won lessons from building a Claude Code personal assistant. Here are my last two videos that are kind of related to this, and then you have the top competing videos and kind of a breakdown for each one of these videos, including what channel it came from, etc. So this is all being generated using one of the skills, as we'll see in a bit. So I have all of these skills that I've added to L, and one of them is researching new videos. So in there, we're describing everything we want in this research, as well as leveraging these other tools to generate thumbnails, to generate optimized titles, to generate video hooks, etc. So these are like skills leveraging other skills, or compound skills, if you will. And if we keep scrolling down, we see patterns that it identified from our competitor research, the content gaps. And then down here, we can see all of the actual options that it generated. So we have several titles that it proposed. I used Claude Code as my assistant for 3 months. Big mistakes were made, so that's option number 1. That's the one we saw. The Claude Code personal assistant lessons nobody tells you. I built my AI assistant wrong. Here's what actually works. 3 months of Claude Code assistant mistakes so you don't have to. The personal assistant setup, that took me weeks to get right. And then here's the recommendation along with the thumbnail concept. So it has a few thumbnail concepts for each of the titles that it came up with, along with its overall recommendation here. And then we have our hook, including how the scene should play out. So my screen should be showing Claude Code Assistant interface, quick cuts of 3 to 4 visual mistakes, and then a voiceover. This cost me 10 hours. This broke my entire workflow, and this almost made me give up completely. Okay, that's pretty good. So you can see how detailed and high quality this research document is, because we are leveraging those skills, and in those skills we're progressively disclosing these really detailed and high quality design requirement documents that guide the agent in creating these really high quality outputs. So just as an example, if we go into the YouTube title skill, then you can see we have this mandatory reading where it has to look at these design requirements. And here we're just giving a high-level summary of the steps it should take to accomplish this skill. But if we look at the design requirements, this is really where we're guiding the agent in how to create this high-quality output. So it has to meet all of these design requirements when creating a YouTube title that is going to be optimized for SEO, for click-through rate, for generating curiosity, etc. And it's the same thing for generating thumbnails and video hooks. So that's how we're getting these really high-quality outputs. Normally, I would go through the entire research doc a little more carefully and kind of choose which option I like more, but we'll just go with this recommendation for now. This sounds good, Elle. Let's move forward with the suggested title, and let's generate all of the thumbnail options that you came up with for that title, and make sure to save everything and update the research doc. Okay, so we're gonna let her continue working there. So you see that how she'll go off and work for like 10 minutes at a time, and then follow up and then ask if she needs any additional input. So it really is just like how Claude Code works on your coding projects, except you can see how long horizon this is for a non-coding task. So really that's the goal, is to automate as much as possible and make the assistant as autonomous as possible. Now, coming back to the context system, so we kind of already saw how in each of the subsystems we have another Claude MD that explains how this subsystem works. And then, for example, in the projects, this would be our Claude MD. So we're explaining, each of the projects that we have in here. And then if we click into the YouTube project, this is where we're going to have a lot more detail about my YouTube, and specifically pointing it to where these different directories that are relevant to this project are. So here we're pointing it to this episode research directory, where we generate all of our research documents, but we're also pointing it to my YouTube project directory, which is on a totally different folder on my file system. And we're explaining how, what are all the different files that are in those episode directories. So again, it's just getting this deeper and deeper context as needed. If we look at the memory system, this one's really important. Here we have, again, another Claude MD that explains how the memory system works, and we're kind of breaking down these core memory files. So we've instructed it to create memories in these markdown files, which will be organized, for example, learnings, user preferences, user projects, and even work status, which is going to correspond to the work that it's doing now. So this is kind of a way for it to keep a status update on what it's accomplished so far. And so Elle is completely responsible for not only using her memories, but also writing to memories and keeping really this whole context folder up to date. So anytime Elle learns something new about me, about my projects, Elle will come into this folder and update the necessary files. And this works really closely with the Hooks system, which we'll talk about in a bit, but we basically use Hooks to steer Elle and give her reminders on when she should be updating her memories, as we'll see in a bit. So I just got the sound that she finished something again. Okay, so Elle just updated the research doc, and it looks like she went ahead and generated several thumbnails for these different concepts. We had 1, 2, and 3. So she updated the research doc, saved the thumbnails to this folder, and then updated her work status. It's cool. So here are the thumbnail concepts, and she updated the file locations here, as you can see. Okay, big mistakes were made. I'm not sure. Maybe this will make more sense with the title. So I forgot what the title was. Let's check this out. Yeah, so the option 1 title was, I used Claude Code as my assistant for 3 months. Big mistakes were made. Okay, so now that we have that context, Okay, you can see that it's progressively getting worse from month 1 to month 2 to month 3 is like a complete biohazard meltdown. So this is not bad when you actually look at what the title was. Let's check out these other ones. So that was concept 1, time evolution with mistakes. Here we have concept 1B of a before and after disaster. Okay, this is actually really good, except for the fact that that's not me on the left. But here's the thing, right? Like, the system is not going to be perfect, but this is everything that's happening right now is like getting me like 95% there, right? I could easily take this thumbnail, pop it into Nano Banana, which is actually what Elle is using to generate these thumbnails in the first place. We could pop this into Nano Banana and just face swap me, and this thing is good to go. So this is actually really impressive. You can even see the VS Code loaded on the desktop back there, which is so awesome. Now let's check out finally the last concept, 1C, which is single mistake moment, and this was the recommended. Oops. Okay, this one's not bad either. Actually, they're all not bad. If I was gonna pick a favorite, it's probably either this one or this one. But honestly, they're all not bad. Nice. I want to go forward with concept 1B, the before and after disaster. So let's do that and update the doc with the final decision. Okay, so I'm just going to let her go update the doc. So coming back to the context system, hopefully that gives you a good idea of how memory and projects work here. Ultimately, this is all context for Elle that, again, she's going to be leveraging to really give us the most personalized and relevant output that she can, and she's also responsible for managing it. The projects are especially important, like as Elle learns new details about, for example, who are my YouTube competitors? What is even my definition of a competitor? Like what subscriber range should they be in, for example? So as she learns all of that, she's constantly updating these files. And then finally, you also have the tools here, which is going to have really extensive documentation. So for example, I have this local MCP that I developed for translating subtitle files for my videos into different languages, as well as the descriptions and titles for my videos. So this has complete documentation on how to use this server, all the different tools that it has. This is a little bit less necessary for MCPs because when you connect MCP servers to Claude, all of the tool schemas for the server are automatically injected into the system prompt. So it's actually already going to know all of this as long as you had good documentation and doc strings in your MCP server. But the reason why I have this documentation here is because I'm in the process of changing out these MCP servers for CLI tools where we can leverage skills and just have Claude read this documentation whenever it actually needs to, rather than using an MCP server and having to inject all of that context into the system prompt every time, even though we might not be using all of those tools. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit, but just notice how you can create these really dense documentations that go into a lot of detail and are really comprehensive, but the system can still be super token efficient to access this data because Claude can use tools like glob to find specific documentation that it needs, and even use the tool grep to do a specific search within this document for just the documentation for the specific tool that it needs to use. So it doesn't even need to read this whole document if it's just looking for one tool, for example. So that's the context system, and really that's one of the biggest pieces that makes this whole thing work. So we talked about the system prompt, we talked about managing the context. The final piece is the action system, or the actions that the agent is able to take. And a lot of that happens through tools that are built into Claude, also MCP servers. More importantly, now that we have skills, you can see all of the skills that I've added to Elle. So the really cool thing about skills is ultimately they're just packaged instructions in this skill.md file on what to do, with additional context, which you can include inside of this skills folder. Like here I have a CLI reference. And more importantly, since Claude can run bash commands, you can also have a skill that runs Python scripts or bash scripts or even CLI tools. And this is huge because I used to have several local MCPs that I developed for specific tool sets, like working with my YouTube analytics, interacting with Obsidian for my notes. And what I've started doing is just vibe coding really lightweight CLI tools and then using them with UV tools so that they can be accessed from any terminal. And then once I vibe code it, I have Claude actually come up with a reference documentation or a usage documentation on how to use that CLI tool. So this one, for example, is for using Obsidian, which is a note-taking app where I have a ton of my brain dumps and where I take a lot of notes when I'm learning something new. So for example, in here is where I kind of took all of my notes for Claude Agent Skills. So this was the comprehensive doc that I created for the last episode and which I shared with you guys. So you can see there's so much context that I have in Obsidian. And with the CLI tool, it can interact with Obsidian just like you would with an MCP server, but with the benefit of that progressive disclosure where I don't have to actually connect an MCP server and take up all of that space in the context window for the system prompt. So then in the skill, all we have to do is really point it to this CLI reference and just give it short examples of how to use the CLI, but then telling it, if it does need more information, if it runs into errors, whatever, then go see the full documentation. The last thing to cover is hooks, and this is really the infrastructure that facilitates the context engineering, tracing, debugging, steering the agent at the right time. So it's a powerful control mechanism for the whole system. And these different trace hooks are just to capture all of the different actions that are happening so that we can see what's going on under the hood as L works, and it's all being recorded to LangFuse, which in a bit I'll show you the full trace of all of the work that L did in this session. So that's all the trace hooks are. The most important ones are these two. First, you have load context, which is just going to load this Claude MD file in the context directory, and it's going to dump that into the context for Claude every single time the user submits a prompt. And this is really important because we don't want to rely on Claude deciding whether it wants to read this particular file, because this is part of what actually makes the personal assistant run, right? Is this context system. And so we want to trigger that every single time the user submits a prompt. And then the other one that's really important is the memory reminder. So this hook also triggers every time a user submits a prompt. And this is going to inject a system reminder telling L every single conversation turn she should reflect on what's been done and then update the work status document, as well as create any new memories. So this is what allows her to continuously be updating the context system. And I first learned about this actually just working with Claude Code a lot, because when you're using Claude Code, sometimes you'll notice in the tool outputs that there are these system reminders that get injected where the harness is reminding Claude after using a certain tool to take a certain action. So that's where I got this idea, and it works amazingly to steer the agent and get more reliable, repeatable behavior. I'm just going to quickly make sure that we finished this. So yeah, L updated the research doc and then got our final selections in there. Now I want to show you all the work that L actually did. So using the hook system, we record all of the actions that L takes in each session using LangFuse, which is an open source library. So here was our initial message that we kicked off. Hey L, can you help me research my next YouTube video, etc., etc. And then here is the final output for this conversation turn. But if we click into this trace, you can see this actually ran for 8 minutes. So this was a really long running task where Elle was taking all of these tool calls where it was searching for different files. Here it's looking into her memory to see if she has any prior memories about research that was already done or my YouTube or whatever. And then just looking through my YouTube project, since I mentioned YouTube, it's going to read a ton of different files here. And you can see there's just a lot of actions that it's taking. Eventually, she starts using the YouTube Analytics MCP server to get information on my channel, it looks like. And then she's updating her to-dos constantly to track all of the work that she's doing. Then you get a ton more calls to the YouTube Analytics MCP server. So here is where she's probably doing the competitive research. So yeah, here's a competitor video, stop using Claude Code wrong. So she continues to work, and that eventually ends 8 minutes later with this output that we got here. We already saw this in the terminal when we were running L, but if we continue scrolling down, so this was the second input that we made. So this was our second conversation turns where we said, that sounds good, let's move forward with this, and go ahead and generate all of the thumbnail options. So if we click into this, you can see this ran for another 3 minutes. And again, this is where she was running bash commands to call Gemini CLI and actually generate these thumbnails using Nano Banana. Finally, we had one more conversation turn where we chose our final concept that we wanted to move forward with, and then told her to go ahead and update the final document. That took about a minute. So all in all, it took Elle maybe 12 or so minutes to do all of the competitive research, find similar videos to mine, extract the patterns for titles, thumbnails, video ideas that were working, identified content gaps, did all of that, even generated using best practices the most likely title plus thumbnail concepts that would work for this video, and then generated those thumbnails, those beautiful thumbnails as we saw with Nano Banana. Now, Elle can help with other things like financial analysis. She has other tools and skills, but I really wanted to showcase this more comprehensive and complex task where this used to be an entire workflow that, again, would take me hours to complete from start to finish, from doing all the research myself to, as you saw, coming up with ideas, brainstorming, and then eventually finding that optimal combination of title, thumbnail, and hook. So I spent a lot of time getting this system to work how you see it here, with the outputs pretty much exactly how I want. But again, that took me a decent amount of optimizing, but it's all worth it because this now saves me hours every single week. So hopefully that was insightful of how the system works and how you can potentially build one for yourself to start generating some real value and time savings for your own work. Thank you guys so much for watching. Give this video a like if you learned something, if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to check out my next video on where I'll be sharing the highest lever hard-won lessons that I've learned in making this system. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.